August 13, 2018. Frederick, Colorado. A quiet subdivision of new homes and oil field workers. Chris Watts stands in his driveway speaking to a neighbor while police enter his house. His pregnant wife, Shannon Watts, and their two daughters, Bella and Celeste, are reported missing. He appears calm. His voice is steady. His posture is controlled. If stories like this matter to you, consider subscribing, because what happens next reveals how this system truly works. Officers conduct a welfare check after Shannon's friend contacts authorities. Shannon is 15 weeks pregnant. Her purse is inside the house. Her phone is on a couch cushion. Her car is in the garage. There are no signs of forced entry. Bed sheets are missing from the master bedroom. Chris Watts tells officers he last saw his family in the early morning hours. He says he left for work at an oil site operated by Anadarko Petroleum. Police body camera footage records his movements inside the home. He avoids direct answers. He sways slightly. He folds his arms across his chest. He does not ask officers where his children might be. He does not search the property. Investigators note these details. At this stage, he is not under arrest. He is a concerned husband. The next day, he gives a televised interview outside his home. He asks for the safe return of his family. His tone remains flat. He states he wants them back. The footage spreads nationwide. Friends and relatives watch closely. Detectives do the same. Investigators review surveillance video from a neighbor's security camera. The camera captures Chris Watts backing his truck into his driveway in the early morning hours of August 13th. He normally parks on the street. The footage shows him loading items into the truck for approximately 40 minutes. He tells police he loads tools for work. The video does not show Shannon or the children leaving the house. Detectives conduct a detailed interview. Watts states he and Shannon have an emotional conversation in the early hours. He claims they discuss separation. He says he leaves for work while his family remains home. Phone data contradicts portions of his timeline. Shannon's phone registers no activity after 1:48 a.m. On August 15th, investigators ask Watts to take a polygraph examination. He agrees. During pre-test questioning, he denies harming his family. The polygraph results indicate deception. The examiner informs him that he did not pass. Detectives press further. After several hours, Watts changes his account. He states that Shannon kills their daughters after an argument. He claims he walks in and sees her strangling one of the children. He says he responds by strangling Shannon in anger. He describes placing her body in his truck. He says he transports all three bodies to his work site. This is the first confession. It shifts blame. It provides a narrative. But it leaves gaps. Investigators secure a search warrant for the oil site known as Survey 319. It is a remote location with large oil storage tanks and open land. On August 16th, authorities recover Shannon Watts' body in a shallow grave near the tanks. The bodies of Bella and Celeste are found inside separate crude oil tanks. The recovery requires draining thousands of gallons of oil. The process takes hours. The placement of the bodies contradicts Watts' claim that he reacts in sudden anger. It reflects planning. It reflects transport. It reflects disposal methods designed to conceal evidence. Investigators review GPS data from his work truck. The data confirms he travels directly to Survey 319 that morning. He remains there for an extended period before contacting co-workers. Text messages reveal that Watts is engaged in an extramarital relationship with a co-worker. Financial records show the family faces debt. These factors provide context but not justification. Detectives continue to compare his statements with digital evidence. On November 6, 2018, Chris Watts pleads guilty to 9 criminal counts, including first-degree murder for the deaths of Shannon, Bella, and Celeste, unlawful termination of a pregnancy, and tampering with deceased human bodies. The plea agreement removes the death penalty from consideration. In return, he accepts multiple life sentences without the possibility of parole. During sentencing on November 19, 2018, the court hears victim impact statements from Shannon's family. Watts addresses the court briefly. He does not offer a detailed explanation. He receives 5 life sentences, 3 to be served consecutively, plus additional years for other charges. He is transferred to the custody of the Colorado Department of Corrections and later moved to a facility in Wisconsin for security reasons. In February 2019, Watts provides a more detailed account to investigators during a prison interview. He admits that he killed Shannon by strangulation in their bedroom. He states that his daughters were still alive when he placed them in the truck. He describes killing them at the oil site. This admission directly contradicts his earlier claim that Shannon killed the children. The missing detail in his first confession becomes clear. The responsibility was always his. The investigation demonstrates how digital evidence, surveillance footage, and behavioral analysis expose inconsistencies. His calm demeanor during early interviews does not prevent scrutiny. His partial confession does not withstand forensic review. The case moves quickly from missing persons to homicide within 3 days. Inside the prison system, Watts begins serving life sentences in a maximum security facility. Inmates convicted of high-profile crimes often face protective custody. Transfers between states occur to reduce risk. Life without parole means no release date. His daily routine now follows institutional structure. Count times. Restricted movement. Limited contact with the outside world. The Colorado sentencing reflects a system that resolves the case without a trial. A plea agreement spares the state the cost and duration of capital proceedings. It also spares the family prolonged public testimony. The outcome is final. There is no possibility of parole under Colorado law for these convictions. The Watts case illustrates how a controlled public appearance can mask internal collapse. It shows how investigators rely on technology and patience. It also reveals how a confession that omits one critical detail can unravel under pressure. The missing detail was not minor. It was the truth about who killed the children. In the weeks after sentencing, the case does not disappear. It shifts from courtroom proceedings to institutional custody. Chris Watts enters the Colorado Department of Corrections as inmate number 181856. Within a month, officials transfer him out of state. He is moved to Dodge Correctional Institution in Waupun, Wisconsin. The decision is administrative. High-profile offenders can become targets inside general population facilities. Interstate compacts allow transfers for safety and security. Life without parole in the United States means confinement until death, absent extraordinary legal relief. There is no parole board review. There is no scheduled reconsideration. His sentence structure includes 3 consecutive life terms for the murders of his daughters and additional life terms for Shannon Watts and the unlawful termination of her pregnancy. The legal language is precise. The outcome is permanent. Dodge Correctional Institution functions as a maximum security intake and assessment center. Inmates are evaluated, classified, and assigned housing. Protective custody is common for individuals convicted of crimes involving children. Protective custody limits movement. It separates vulnerable inmates from the general population. It also increases isolation. Daily life inside such a facility is structured. Wake-up times are fixed. Meals occur at designated hours. Movement requires authorization. Counts occur multiple times per day. Cameras monitor corridors. Doors are electronically controlled. Phone calls are recorded. Mail is screened. There is little privacy. Routine replaces autonomy. Watts' case continues to generate public interest. Letters arrive from across the country. Some are from individuals seeking explanations. Some express anger. Some express support. Prison policy permits correspondence subject to screening. Outgoing and incoming mail is logged. High-profile inmates often receive more mail than the average prisoner. In February 2019, investigators traveled to Wisconsin to conduct a post-sentencing interview. The interview lasts several hours. It is recorded. Watts provides a fuller account than he did before sentencing. He states that he plans the murders in advance. He describes killing Shannon in their bedroom after she returns from a business trip. He confirms that his daughters are alive when he loads them into his truck. He admits killing them separately at the oil site. These admissions are consistent with forensic findings. The interview does not change his sentence. It clarifies the factual record. Law enforcement closes remaining investigative questions. The case file becomes complete. The criminal justice system moves forward. Financial consequences extend beyond incarceration. Civil claims are filed. Shannon Watts' family pursues a wrongful death lawsuit. In November 2018, a Colorado judge orders Watts to pay more than $6 million in damages. The judgment is symbolic. Inmates serving life sentences rarely possess the means to satisfy such amounts. Still, the ruling acknowledges measurable harm under civil law. Inside prison, access to programs depends on classification and behavior. Educational courses may be available. Work assignments are limited in maximum security settings. Inmates earn minimal wages for approved jobs. Commissary purchases are restricted by policy and available funds. Every transaction is documented. The American prison system operates under lax oversight. Wardens manage facilities. State departments set policy. Federal courts remain available for constitutional claims. Inmates may file grievances through internal procedures. They may file appeals or post-conviction motions through counsel. Watts does not go to trial, so appellate review is limited. His guilty plea waives many issues that would otherwise be contested. Media attention gradually declines, but the case remains referenced in discussions about domestic violence and familicide. Criminologists analyze patterns. Law enforcement agencies review investigative steps. The use of digital forensics, GPS tracking, and surveillance footage becomes a teaching example in training environments. Life inside protective custody carries psychological weight. Isolation reduces exposure to violence but increases separation from social contact. Movement outside the cell is scheduled. Recreation occurs in controlled spaces. Visits, if approved, are monitored. Inmates serving life without parole must adapt to a reality without release. Watts' institutional record is not public in detail, but standard correctional practice requires compliance with rules. Infractions result in sanctions. Good behavior maintains housing status. The system measures conduct through reports and reviews. Time continues. The sentence does not shorten. The broader system reflects competing priorities. Public safety is immediate. Retribution is codified through sentencing. Rehabilitation becomes secondary when release is not possible. Resources are allocated to custody, security, and administration. Cases like this test the balance between transparency and privacy. The criminal justice process concludes formally with sentencing, but its administrative consequences extend indefinitely. Records remain accessible. Court documents remain archived. The victims' names are preserved in legal filings and memorial statements. The offender's name is preserved in correctional databases. The missing detail in his first confession continues to define the case. His initial claim attempts to shift responsibility. Evidence contradicts it. Subsequent admissions confirm it. Investigators rely on sequence, data, and physical recovery to establish fact. The system responds with structured penalties. Years pass. The legal status remains unchanged. Life without parole is literal. There is no scheduled end date. The prison system functions as designed: containment, supervision, documentation. One household in Colorado ceases to exist. One offender enters permanent custody. The investigative record stands closed. The correctional file remains active. The investigation into the Watts case also highlights the role of forensic evidence in confirming the sequence of events. Physical evidence collected from the home and the oil site aligns with Chris Watts' final admission. The bedsheets from the master bedroom, missing when police first arrived, indicate the initial actions taken after Shannon's death. Blood patterns, truck GPS logs, and video surveillance collectively reconstruct the timeline. Each piece of data eliminates discrepancies between his initial statements and the actual events. The forensic record leaves no ambiguity. Responsibility lies solely with Watts. Digital forensics further reinforce the factual record. Shannon Watts' phone data shows the last messages sent before she disappears. GPS coordinates from Chris Watts' truck provide precise travel times between the home and the oil site. Social media activity, text messages, and digital receipts corroborate the timeline. Investigators compile the information into a cohesive sequence, confirming the premeditated nature of the acts. The cumulative weight of evidence eliminates the possibility of alternative explanations. The pattern is clear, methodical, and verifiable. Interviews with friends, neighbors, and colleagues provide context. They describe Chris Watts as calm and polite. Co-workers recall routine behaviors and interactions. Friends report minor marital tensions but no indication of imminent danger. These observations, when contrasted with investigative evidence, illustrate how outward appearances can conceal intent. The juxtaposition of social normalcy and internal violence underscores the challenges faced by law enforcement in domestic cases. The case also exposes systemic procedures in missing persons investigations. Police initiate standard welfare checks when contact is lost. They interview immediate contacts, family, and neighbors. They review digital records and environmental evidence. In the Watts case, procedural rigor uncovers inconsistencies early. Body camera footage, truck activity logs, and polygraph examinations provide objective data. Each measure reinforces investigative integrity and demonstrates the methodical approach necessary in complex domestic incidents. Legal procedures surrounding confession and plea agreements are central to this case. Chris Watts' initial statements shift responsibility, but formal questioning and forensic confirmation lead to a complete confession. The plea agreement removes the death penalty but ensures multiple life sentences. Courts utilize structured sentencing guidelines to determine cumulative penalties. Each conviction is clearly documented, reflecting legislative intent and judicial standards. The legal process balances factual accountability with procedural fairness. The psychological aspect of confession is evident in Watts' behavior. Early interviews show detachment. He maintains composure despite mounting evidence. As investigators present contradictory data, his narrative changes. The progression from partial confession to full admission demonstrates the interplay between evidence presentation and suspect response. The system relies on structured interviews, corroborated evidence, and methodical questioning to reach factual clarity. Each detail omitted initially becomes a critical point in understanding the true sequence of events. Within the broader context, the case exemplifies domestic homicide patterns in the United States. Investigators compare similar incidents to identify risk factors and preventive strategies. The presence of financial stress, extramarital relationships, and interpersonal tension are noted in the case files. Data-driven insights contribute to law enforcement training, public safety initiatives, and research into familial homicide. The Watts case serves as a reference point for evaluating investigative methods, evidentiary standards, and institutional response. Prison administration and inmate classification also intersect with investigative outcomes. Following conviction, Chris Watts enters the correctional system under maximum security classification. Protective custody ensures safety from the general inmate population. Transfers between facilities reflect administrative considerations for high-profile offenders. Daily routines, monitoring protocols, and behavioral assessments illustrate the operational mechanisms of incarceration. The case demonstrates how judicial outcomes directly shape correctional management. The handling of high-profile evidence reflects careful adherence to chain-of-custody protocols. Physical evidence, digital records, and recorded confessions are catalogued and stored according to strict standards. Forensic analysts document each step of evidence recovery and testing. Legal counsel and court representatives observe compliance. The procedural rigor ensures that the integrity of evidence withstands judicial scrutiny. This systematic approach reinforces accountability and transparency in the criminal justice process. Finally, the Watts case underscores the intersection of public interest and institutional response. Media coverage amplifies scrutiny, requiring correctional officials to balance privacy, security, and transparency. Public records, court filings, and media reports are managed to prevent compromise of institutional protocols. Observers follow the case closely, yet operational standards remain consistent. The system's response is procedural, evidence-based, and methodical, reflecting the principles of lawful accountability. In the final chapter, the consequences of Chris Watts' actions are fully realized, both within the criminal justice system and in the lives of those affected. The Colorado court records remain public, documenting each conviction, sentence, and plea agreement. Watts' multiple life sentences without the possibility of parole guarantee that he will spend the remainder of his life in custody. The legal process concludes with formal closure, but the broader implications continue. Victim impact statements, memorials, and public discussion preserve the memory of Shanann, Bella, and Celeste Watts. Within the correctional system, Watts adapts to long-term confinement. Daily life is strictly regimented, waking at designated times, following assigned work or educational programs when permitted, attending scheduled counts, and remaining under constant surveillance. Interaction with other inmates is highly limited due to protective custody. Movement outside the cell is controlled and monitored. Communication with the outside world is restricted, consisting primarily of approved mail and monitored phone calls. The prison environment emphasizes containment, compliance, and procedural order. The case continues to serve as a reference in law enforcement and criminal justice training. Investigators study the combination of behavioral analysis, forensic evidence, surveillance footage, and digital tracking that led to the resolution of the case. Chris Watts' partial confession illustrates the importance of verifying statements against objective evidence. Each step of the investigation, from initial welfare checks to recovery of the victims' bodies, is analyzed for procedural effectiveness. The case informs best practices for handling domestic homicide and familicide incidents. For the families of Shanann and the children, the case leaves lasting emotional and financial impact. Civil suits confirm damages in excess of $6 million, though the practical ability of Watts to satisfy these amounts is minimal. Memorials and advocacy efforts continue, raising awareness of domestic violence and the warning signs of familial homicide. Social and psychological research incorporates findings from the case to study motives, behaviors, and preventative measures. Public scrutiny remains a constant element. Media coverage and social discourse examine every stage of the case. Analysts review investigative methods, confession procedures, and forensic recovery techniques. The narrative of a calm, outwardly composed husband who committed premeditated familicide continues to capture attention. Discussions emphasize the contrast between appearance and reality, highlighting how observable behavior can mask intent. Inside the prison, institutional policies determine the daily experience of life without parole. Correctional staff monitor compliance with rules, conduct behavioral assessments, and provide limited programs for work or education. Violations of conduct result in formal sanctions. Compliance allows for incremental privileges within the controlled environment. The permanence of the sentence creates a structured, predictable life that emphasizes accountability and containment. The Watts case exemplifies the intersection of criminal behavior, investigative diligence, and the correctional system. The initial calm demeanor, the partial confession, the recovery of bodies, and the forensic corroboration collectively demonstrate how law enforcement and judicial procedures work together to establish factual certainty. It illustrates the importance of procedural rigor, careful evidence handling, and adherence to legal standards in resolving high-profile crimes. Ultimately, the case confirms that a missing detail can unravel an entire narrative. Chris Watts' attempt to mislead investigators by claiming his wife harmed their children fails under scrutiny. Objective evidence exposes the full sequence of events. The criminal justice system responds with structured sentencing and long-term incarceration. The families of the victims receive legal recognition of harm, and law enforcement retains a clear record of the investigative process. The story concludes with the understanding that criminal accountability extends beyond the courtroom. Evidence-based investigation, procedural diligence, and institutional management ensure that justice is served. Chris Watts remains confined for life, the victims are memorialized, and the case continues to inform law enforcement, corrections, and public awareness of domestic homicide.